The encyclopedia was born during the Enlightenment. It was published between 1751 and 1772 in 35 volumes as scholars attempted to record the breadth of human knowledge. The Enlightenment was filled with new philosophies and ideas about the world around us and the people who live in it. The Age of Reason occurred in the late 17th century and dominated the 18th century. People in Europe had begun shifting away from religion as a guide to all their thoughts and turned toward reason. Education became critical, and people explored ideas that impacted the development of Europe and North America. The Enlightenment even played a significant role in the American Revolution. Many ideas come from the Age of Reason, and we're going to explore 7 of the best. Number 1. The scientific method. The scientific method is probably one of the most famous ideas today. Most people are taught it in science class as children. However, the scientific method was not self-evident. Before the Enlightenment, people tended to follow a more discussion-based method of science, which involved gathering multiple points of view. This process was called the Aristotelian method, and people have been using it since the 4th century BCE. As the scientific revolution grew, people needed a new process. The scientific method we know today started with Francis Bacon. He lived in England from 1561 to 1626 and was a politician, philosopher, and writer. Although his political career abruptly ended when he was found guilty of accepting bribes. As a writer and philosopher, Bacon was very interested in science and felt scientists needed a method for making unbiased conclusions. In 1620, he published New Organon, or True Directions Concerning the Interpretation of Nature. His book outlined the Baconian method, which required deductive reasoning and controlled, repeatable experiments. Bacon believed that people begin research with preconceived ideas of their findings, which can lead a person to skew evidence, whether or not the scientist is conscious of it. The scientific method significantly reduces the opportunity for bias to interfere, allowing for more reliable scientific data. Although Bacon's work technically happened before the Enlightenment, it became popular during the Age of Reason. Other scientists, like Robert Boyle, encouraged its use in the Royal Society, a group of English scientists. The methodical and rational ideas of the scientific method influenced other thinkers during the Enlightenment, giving the era its foundation of reason. Number 2. The social contract theory. The social contract theory had a significant impact on the Western world and was one of the foundational ideas of the American Revolution. This revolutionary idea is credited to John Locke, an English philosopher who lived from 1632 to 1704. He is called the father of liberalism because many of his theories focused on a person's right to liberty. Locke believed that people had a natural right to personal freedom. This liberty was more important than politics or the government, but it was not free from morality or social judgments because there is also basic human morals that people must follow. People should have the freedom to choose and be equal under the law. These ideas influenced Locke's theory of the social contract. A social contract is an agreement between members of a group or community. This agreement is not always explicit or even spoken, but people have specific duties and expectations just because they live in a society. Locke focused on the responsibilities of the ruling class, like the monarchy. The king has the right to rule, but must also uphold the people's rights to life, liberty, and property. If the king does not protect the people and maintain his part of the social contract, then the people have the right to remove him from power. Locke wrote a book called Two Treatises of Government in 1689 that outlined his viewpoints on government and individual rights, and it has remained his most popular work. His philosophies went on to influence revolutions in France and the United States. Many of Locke's ideas influenced America's Declaration of Independence. Locke significantly influenced Thomas Jefferson, who tweaked Locke's views on fundamental human rights. According to Jefferson, people have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These ideas about government and human rights continue to influence modern politics and philosophy today as people wrestle with freedom and authority. Number 3. The 3 laws of motion. We might not think of scientific advancements as philosophical ideas, but the Enlightenment explored ideas from many fields, not just politics. Isaac Newton lived from 1642 to 1726, but stepped into history in 1687 with his book Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy. He wrote it for the scientific community, and Newton did not include any of the customary summaries or metaphors to help lay people understand his work. Although this may seem odd to us today, some scholars have suggested that Newton did this on purpose to avoid the Inquisition. The clergy still persecuted scientific ideas that did not align with church doctrine, so Newton may have believed that they couldn't persecute him for concepts the clergy didn't understand. Newton's work became a foundational part of modern physics, and he applied much of his work to astronomy. His first law states objects in motion must remain in motion until another force changes that motion. This law applies to things in a vacuum where there is no gravity. Newton argued that objects do not change without interacting with the environment. He also argued that objects move in a straight line, so anything curving has a force acting on it, which is how Newton explained the planet's orbits around the Sun. Newton's second law deals with an object's acceleration. Outside forces can change an object's direction or speed, but constant forces create a constant speed. Newton used this law to explain why the planets orbit instead of moving directly into the Sun. Newton's third law maintains that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you tap the table with your finger, the table taps your finger back with the same force. Newton's work amazed Enlightenment thinkers, and it continues to impact how we view physics today. The laws of motion are still taught in schools, and we use them to understand how the world works around us. Number 4. Branches of government. Although it may seem commonplace to us today, separating power within the government is a relatively new idea that took hold during the Enlightenment with the help of a French philosopher known as Montesquieu. He lived from 1689 to 1755, and although he trained as a lawyer, he became a writer who was most famous for publishing The Spirit of the Laws in 1748. Montesquieu argued that the government should be split into multiple branches, each dedicated to a specific aspect of governance, whether that be legislative or judicial. Each section could focus on its job, and separating power would prevent corruption. His book restructured governments and called for rulers to consider the people's cultural heritage. He even called for the end of slavery. The Spirit of the Laws was so controversial that the Catholic Church banned the book only 3 years after it was published, but even they could not stop Montesquieu's ideas. Other Enlightenment thinkers explored the implications of a government divided into branches, and as the idea continued to spread, people began putting his theories into practice on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. Montesquieu's work influenced the revolutions in the late 1700s, changing how people set up their republican governments and influencing how we see government today. We are still living out the implication of his theory as we explore how to best set up a government that can avoid corruption while caring for the needs of the people. Number 5. Capitalism. The primary economic system of the world today also got its start in the Age of Reason with Scottish philosopher Adam Smith. He lived from 1723 to 1790 and became known as the father of modern economics. At the time, Europe utilized the mercantile system, which stated that countries needed to export more than they imported to gain wealth. A nation's wealth was based on how much gold and silver each country had, and imports required them to spend that wealth. Adam Smith argued that free markets would actually increase everyone's wealth, and the free market would control itself through supply and demand and human self-interest. In his model, undesirable jobs would pay more, allowing money to offset a job's unpleasant aspects. Smith also advocated a laissez-faire economy, where merchants would operate without government interference. He maintained that human empathy would balance self-interest and create a system that would benefit all. He wrote several books on his economic theories, but his most famous one was an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. His book discussed multiple topics: taxation, stocks, and political economic systems. It was so popular that the English and Scottish governments held meetings with Smith to discuss trade and taxes. Adam Smith's economic ideas radically changed how people saw the economy and how nations thought about wealth. He helped push the Western world into capitalism, which has become the primary international economic system we are still examining today. Number 6. Humanity and inherent evil. Although many early thinkers in the Enlightenment consider people to be inherently good and to lean naturally toward having empathy for others, some thinkers near the end of the Age of Reason began exploring the idea that people also have a strong tendency for evil. One of those philosophers was Thomas Paine, an American philosopher most famous for his pamphlet Common Sense. Thomas Paine lived from 1737 to 1809. He was born in England but moved to America right before the American Revolution broke out. Upon arriving in America, he discovered that many colonists were still loyal to the crown. Paine's work actively pushed the colonists toward revolution. His work relied heavily upon Locke's ideas concerning society and natural rights. But Paine added the notion that evil was an ever-present part of human existence. More evil could exist in a larger group than in a smaller group, making large societies prone to evil. Paine argued that monarchies could not handle that evil because they take away natural rights. Because people had inherent evil in them, Thomas Paine called for the colonists to declare independence and embrace a government without a monarchy that was better suited to reduce corruption. Thomas Paine's work helped launch the American Revolution, shaping the modern American government. He also changed how we think about humanity, and we are still wrestling with Paine's ideas today. Number 7. Atomic theory. We might think of atomic theory as a new scientific development, but it has floated around the scientific community for centuries. One of the modern proponents of atoms was Robert Boyle, an Irish scientist who lived from 1627 to 1691. He began his education with rhetoric and ethics, but he befriended Samuel Hartlib in the 1650s. Hartlib had interests in many areas and established a group of scientists and scholars to share ideas, letters, and patents. The Hartlib Circle covered many scientific fields and was dedicated to both Protestantism and education. Robert Boyle soon began pursuing scientific ideas with his friends and became a chemist. Alongside Robert Hooke, Boyle experimented with gases and discovered the inverse relationship between the pressure of a gas and its volume. His discovery is known today as Boyle's Law. However, Boyle's work with gases also led him to believe that gas was made up of many tiny particles that were too small to see under a microscope. Not all Enlightenment scientists agreed with Boyle's theory on atoms, which he called corpuscles, but they still respected it. Robert Boyle was an excellent scientist devoted to providing methodical information and weeding out unscientific data. He encouraged the scientific method, and others joined him in establishing an empirical way to conduct experiments. Although he contributed much to science during his life, his work on atomic theory influenced how science developed and eventually led modern scientists to explore the implication of atoms in our world today. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about the Enlightenment era, check out our book, Age of Enlightenment, a captivating guide to the Age of Reason, including the lives of Isaac Newton, Francis Bacon, John Locke, and Mary Somerville. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.